My name is Adam Ruben. I used to teach a class at Johns Hopkins called Public Perception of Science. And when I was training to become a scientist, I had this incorrect notion that when the public hears about a scientific advance, they react with wonder and awe and astonishment and gratitude. And that we announce what we've done and what we've created, what we've learned, what we've made, and everybody says, yes, thank you, wonderful scientists, for what you've given us. And my bubble was burst when I was in the lab in 2000, and I heard on the radio on NPR, they announced the completion of the Human Genome Project. And I thought people were going to call in and say, that's wonderful, that's terrific news, but instead people were calling in and saying, you shouldn't have done that. I found this transcript. Pete in St. Louis talks about using the genome for war purposes. What could you do with war purposes? I will sequence you. There's nothing. And I couldn't understand how people had so badly misunderstood this. And so I started looking into public perception of science, and I think the best example of this is the example that some of you might remember of Dolly the sheep. Dolly was the first mammal cloned from an adult cell. She was cloned in 1996. Her cloning was announced in late February of 1997. Now, what do we think of when we think of cloning? We think of Attack of the Clones, Multiplicity, the clones from The Matrix, a giant rooster for some reason. And these are the perceptions that are already in our mind when we hear about a new scientific advance. Now, here's what cloning actually is. You start out your life as one cell, a fertilized egg. That's the one on the left. It divides to become 2, 4, and eventually about 1 trillion cells that are currently in your body. Every cell has the same DNA in your body, but they express it in different ways, and that's how they can become a skin cell, a tooth cell, a hair cell. To clone somebody, you take, let's say, a square skin cell, you put it inside, put the DNA from it inside an egg from which you've removed the DNA and start that dividing. So you can pick which DNA goes into the person you're about to replicate. So pop quiz, if I clone you right now and you're exactly 18 years old today, this was something I asked my students, how old would your clone be a year from now? And I'll pause while you think about that. The wrong guess to answer is 19 years old. The wrong answer is 1 year old. The correct answer is 3 months, because if I clone you right now, something has to happen over the next 9 months, specifically that you develop inside a woman. We haven't figured out a way to do away with that yet. So let's say you wanted to make an army of clones. Let's say you wanted an army of 100,000 clones. What's the first ingredient you're going to need? 100,000 women. All of them willing to donate their wombs to your project, and then you end up with 100,000 babies that you have to raise to age 18 and convince to join your army. So a clone is basically an identical twin born a generation later. But this is Cece, the world's first cloned cat. She was cloned in 2002. The first thing you notice is that she's incredibly adorable. The second thing you'll notice is that Cece's genetic mother is really the wrong term, let's say genetic progenitor, the cat from whom she was cloned, doesn't even look like her. And that's because cat fur patterns are determined partially in the womb. So if they're genetically identical, why don't they look the same? And that's because as early as pre-birth, you have things happening to you that shape who you are. Now, that article I showed a second ago was the original article about Dolly in Nature, and they used the term cloning 0 times. But here it is in the public media. In Time magazine, you've got this photoshopped sheep. Der Spiegel was a bit less subtle. That is, if you can clone Dolly, you can presumably clone Hitler, Einstein, and I'm told that was Claudia Schiffer. Now, here's Cece in the media. These are media images when Cece was announced in 2002. You've got Cece in a beaker, implying that she's a product of science and not nature. You've got this badly cloned, photoshopped cat, not even the same cat. And then you've got Cece staring into a mirror as though she's asking, should I be? Here are headlines, and these are headlines from page A1 of the biggest newspapers. You're talking about fear, talking about what's going to happen with cloning run amok, and hello, Dolly, bye-bye, daddy, as fathers are no longer needed. Here's an editorial by Craig Wilson in USA Today where he asks, what happens if you murder your clone? Are you charged with murder or suicide? And I would like to think that most people would read that and say, haha, kind of funny, but I think a lot of people read that and say, wow, great question, Craig Wilson, you asked the tough questions. Why don't the scientists ask these questions? And no wonder, this is what people think of scientists. I did a Google image search for scientists this weekend. Here's what came up. People think that scientists are insane, loony, elderly, white male chemists. When in truth, we're not all chemists. So human beings are wonderful at forming opinions. We are great at forming opinions regardless of whether we know what the hell we're talking about. That's exactly the problem. This is Dolly today. She passed away a few years ago. And She currently exists as a sweater in a British museum, but you can see that the incorrect sheep plus sheep equals 2 sheep motif is still patterned right there, dyed into Dolly's wool. May she rest in peace. So when you hear about a scientific advance, your first reaction should not be to immediately dismiss it, nor should it be to immediately praise it. Is it the role of the public to judge scientists? Yes. But your first reaction should be to instantly want to go and learn more about it. Thank you.